Recording. We're good. All right, topic of the night, medical and legal issues.
You click the mouse.
Anywhere.
First topic, CAMTS. CAMTS is required for all of the air units. It's also one of the lovely things here at Carillion that we have. CAMTS is a 90-page book that you can read with the 10th edition standards. For all intents and purposes of this class, we're only going to discuss what's on the critical care exam and some of the more relevant things. It covers everything from the base specs to the ambulance specs, the helicopter specs, what I'm allowed to do before I come on shift, what I'm allowed to do during my shift, and what I'm allowed to do after my shift before I come in for my next one. It is very specific. On the shared drive this week, you will see a link to the CAMTS standards. I've highlighted everything that you'll need for the critical care exam, so you don't have to read the entire thing. You can skim through and find the blue sections that are highlighted. The big things that they want you to know about: equipment and ops, ambulance specs. What?
Tire pressure.
Tire pressure, apparently. Required equipment, training, and different things like that. So equipment and ops, the vehicle configuration and patient placement has to allow for a safe medical personnel egress, and it has to allow for safe care of the patient. You have to have a certain amount of space to walk down to get to the patient. You have to have a way to get from the front to the back, a certain means of exit from the back and from the front. It goes over lighting, power sources, communication, equipment. It goes over all of that. You have to have sufficient lighting in the back so you can treat your patient, but it's not going to blind the driver in the front. It has to have an inverter in the back. It's got to have all of these specific things, and that's what CAMTS kind of goes over. And that's one of the things it wants you to know. It wants you to know that you should try to avoid that there should be no head strike areas in the vehicle. You shouldn't be able to hit your head on anything. Some people will debate like the oxygen things are a head strike in some of our trucks. Everything should also be secured at all times. The jump bag on the bench seat, if it's on the bench seat, it needs to be seat belted down. And that's something they're big on, because if you're in the event of an accident and that thing comes flying at you, you're done. The helicopter has to have means too to protect the pilot's night vision, and that's another specialty thing that they have specifically for air. They also are required to have night vision goggles, and they have their specs listed as well. You have to have a radio, obviously, and other functional means of communication between yourself and the outside world if you were to need help. And in basic, you need to have everything on that truck so that when you check it off, you can go and take care of any type of patient that's thrown at you, basically. You need to have everything to operate within your scope of practice. You need to have your suction, your heart monitor, all your trauma supplies. It's like a 10-page list on there, guys, of things that you have to have, but it's all things that are fairly common and common sense. You need to have your bandages, you need to have your backboards, you need to have
They had to write it down. It's obviously not common sense.
Very true, but it is in there. Alright. Going over specs for the ground ambulances. They have to be easy to see at all times. Train's going by. They have to have survival gear. Going back to easy to see, they have to have reflective strips on all sides of the truck and a design or a logo. It's recommended they have cameras, governors, weather alerts, and extra communication systems as well. So that way you have all those safety things. The survival gear is required, and you have to have a way to check the dates and everything in it. Fire extinguishers, and believe it or not, non-smoking signs are considered survival gear under there, and they have to be on the truck as well. You have to wear a seatbelt at all times unless it inhibits patient care. And bench seats are actually not recommended, bench seats are not actually recommended. They recommend individual seats, and if you're using a bench seat, they don't recommend the harness, because if you could get trapped in it or you could cause more injuries. So, why is my slides out of order for this? Oh, because mine didn't print as well. Okay, other things that are required for all levels of care, you need to have the basics, the OPA, the pulse ox, the BVM, AED, all of these things for all levels. And that's BLS, that's first responder, everything there. ALS is everything up and then some. You need to have the CPAP and or BiPAP if it's within your scope. The heart monitor, non-invasive monitoring like Untitled, resuscitative meds, advanced airway, needle thoracotomy, all of those things. For critical care, things that are required on the truck, it's everything ALS and BLS and the following. Must have ventilators, must have invasive hemodynamic monitoring like the ART lines and those monitoring systems. You have to have all the medications within your scope of practice that are allowed by your OMD. That doesn't just mean because National Registry allows it, you have to have it on the truck. It means that whatever your OMD says you can give needs to be on the truck or available to you. They also have to have medications for continuous infusions like antihypertensions, vasopressors, antidysrhythmics, bronchodilators, etc. Surgical equipments and the ability to manage central lines, blood product infusions, and temperature management. Specialty care is kind of its own thing. They have different types of specialty cares. They have mobile ICU units, they have the pediatric units, and they have the neonatal units. In order to qualify for one of those, you must have everything that's been listed and the additional resources that are needed to manage that kind of patient. For example, a neonatal patient, you'll need to have Heliox, which is one of the gases that they use for those patients. And that's a required thing to have on the truck. They'll need to have, like that's listed under inhaled gases, fetal heart monitoring, the isolette, and they'll need to have all of their controls. For things like the managing ECMO and the LVAD, BIVAD, RVAD, those are things that are going to be with the mobile ICU units. And these are all listed in CAMTS when you pull up the certification later, or the documentation, I'm sorry. You can read it under 0.30105, and it's all highlighted, so that way you don't have to read the entire thing. That is basically all it needs you to know from CAMTS' point of view. It also wants you to know the driver qualifications, where at minimum the driver has to be a BLS provider and have their EMT. They must have a good driving record, as in within 2 years have no major infractions, or I think they allow 2 is what they had said in there. And that's what we operate by as well. And by major infractions, I mean obviously like no DUIs, no reckless drivings or anything like that's allowed with the CAMTS certification. And it's all listed in here. I think I skipped that part actually. So those are all required. That's another thing I wanted you to know was the driver qualifications. Everything is listed and highlighted, so feel free to go through that at your own discretion, take notes, and just be aware that those are the minimum things that CAMTS wants us to have. And that's what it wants you to know for the critical care side of things. Moving on. Going to kind of keep it up pace today. Going to EMS research. I read a really cool study about this, and we're going to use it as our discussion point. It's where I got some of my quotes from. I think it's really cool that they quoted in 9 years ago, before they started a lot of these studies, that EMS is one of the only few places where you can do an intervention and provide care without a lack of evidence base, because we do a lot of trial by errors on our things. We've done a lot to improve the system in the past years. We have taken things and added things as we've seen the research now supporting that. And that's where I got all of these different little facts from. And the sites and sources are all listed in the PowerPoint as well. The thing about EMS studies, it's really hard to do them. We respond to a diverse variety of calls. And it's also hard to control the variables that are in them. What the patients already have as their comorbidities, what the patients have been taking, what the situation is, and what the background story of the patients are. It's really hard to control those variables to make the study. So a lot of the studies that we currently have are based off of past experiences and runs where they've kind of gathered that evidence together, and they've used that to help develop new treatment plans and methods. And not by just in the past, like years ago, but in the past as in after the events occurred. And by doing some of this research, you can see some of the examples. I listed 2 of them. A lot of places are now shying away from Lasix. A lot of places are now shying away from backboarding. Mass trousers used to be this huge thing. I don't have a truck out there, I don't think, that has one on there. So it kind of shows you how we guide our treatment. We used to do a lot of guessing, and now we're more guiding with the evidence as it supports it. And the last thing to point out about EMS research, it's really difficult to do these studies. Because when we drop a patient off, we don't often find out what happened to them. We do have times where we'll take them back to the nursing home after they treat them, and those scenarios are ones where we're like, okay, so this is what happened with this patient. But a lot of the times we drop them off, they may get admitted, they may get sent home, but we don't really know what actually happened to them. And then we don't submit that data to get to a study, so that way it can be looked at for different scenarios. So just something to kind of keep in mind when we talk about EMS research. It's a really complex field, and it's come a long way from what it used to be. And it's really helped to guide our topics and really helped to guide our treatments and interventions. So I have to apologize. This is where all my other CAMTS slide went. It got moved for some reason. I was getting ready to say I knew there was another CAMTS slide. There's a technical error again. Like I said, on ops, there's policies on speed, use of lights and sirens, drug testing after them. I said the driver qualifications, you must have EVOC, FEMA courses, be an EMT. They also want us to know that for safety education, you have to have a program in place where you get CEs and it's evaluated constantly and updated frequently, so that way we can keep up to date on everything. Staffing and schedules is kind of a cool thing too. You cannot have a shift that exceeds 24 hours, and in order to exceed a 12-hour shift, there are certain criteria that have to be met. There's all kinds of different things that have to go into play with these. And they also monitor back-to-back shift days to make sure that we're not overrun and that we're not run into the ground with some of these to help promote safety. The safety education has to include airway, altitude, cardiac, burns, disasters, EMS radios, environmental emergencies, monitoring OB infection, just culture, vents, trauma, neonate, O2, peds, farm, and respiratory. It's a lot. It's all listed in there, and it's something that it's just really they want you to kind of cover everything when you go over your CE hours. For flight, they also have to do training on in-flight emergencies, surface transport emergencies, aircraft safety, and ground operations like loading and unloading, refueling, and all that stuff. All right, well, that's cool. Deleted my picture. Just culture. Does anybody know what just culture actually means? I didn't. I thought it was just some acronym.
Not that I can repeat. 141.
That's okay. I thought it was an acronym. It actually means that you want to create a culture for a learning environment in the healthcare. In healthcare, we have a lot of instances where a mistake is made, you punish the provider. A mistake is made, you punish the provider. And a lot of times it's just the system at fault. So just culture is trying to promote a better system and to punish only when it's indicated and to promote learning environments. So if a mistake happens, they're trying to come at it more from an approach of let's coach and let's prevent this from happening, let's educate people instead of let's just have punitive action against that provider.
Well, a lot of it's because when you do the just culture, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Just culture trainer.
You go right ahead.
When you have an incident with just culture instead of what happened, and it's not as much about what happened as why. And when they look at the problem, if X happens, did the provider know how to take care of that? Or did the provider have proper training in that? Was there a policy in place that covers what they should do in this situation?
And it can fall into one of the three categories. Is it a human error? Is it meaning that it was completely an accident that the provider didn't know? Was it an at-risk where it was a risk but the provider didn't recognize it? Or was it reckless and you knew it was a risk but you did it anyways?
Yeah, when you get to that point, you've gone through there's 6 questions you have to ask to get to the behavioral choice. You know, was there a policy in place? Did they follow that policy? Did they have the proper equipment? Was it an education issue? Was it a resource issue? Was it a management issue? Did they not have proper guidance on how to act in the situation or what they should do, or have a resource that they could contact to ask further questions? That's why we have the safety timeout policy. If you feel uncomfortable about something, you're not sure how you go, you call your supervisor. If they don't know, they call the transport coordinator.
all true statements. The point of this is it wants, like he said, to find out why. It wants to try to prevent this in the future, and it wants to focus less on let's punish everybody and let's try to make this a better system. In the PowerPoint, you'll be able to go down and click some links to some really good presentations. There's one that was done by the NAMT. There's one that AMR put out for their training that looked pretty cool. There's one from OSHA. There's a couple different presentations that were put out about just culture. The Carillion one wouldn't load in my PowerPoint, so it's out there on Cornerstone too, to give y'all some good resources to look into. But the point of it is to follow this. There's certain values and expectations that are expected of providers. They go by the system design, the behavioral choices, and then the good outcome or the bad outcome. So that's just kind of the flow chart for it. There's a lot of good resources out there on the just culture, and that's what we're kind of aiming to do with society.
Burned my retina with his laser.
Oh.
He's touching me.
Retina.
He's breathing my air.
I'm blinded. Did you?
EMTALA, Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. I'm going to sit here, I'm tired of standing. It prevents hospitals from dumping out patients, meaning because I have Anthem or Aetna, whatever it's really pays for, I'm a more preferred person for the hospital than Medicare and Medicaid because my insurance may pay more. So it kind of prevents them from looking at the insurance status. It prevents them from looking at a bunch of different factors to say this patient is more preferred. Any patient that walks onto an emergency department has the right to be treated in emergency stabilization. In order to comply, you must provide a full evaluation within the facility's capabilities. If you have a CT machine and the patient needs a CT, you give them a CT. If you don't have one, then you'll have to send them somewhere that does, or if yours isn't capable. But you want to provide it within the capabilities. You must provide stabilization treatments. If you're in active labor, that includes delivering a baby. You cannot ship a patient in active labor about to deliver out of a hospital. It is an EMTALA violation. That patient must be stabilized for transport.
Unless.
What?
Unless.
Unless the risks are outweighed by the benefits, and we'll get there. That's the next part. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes while I do this too. EMTALA takes effect as soon as the patient enters a hospital property, and it must be met. There are federal laws against it, and they have been case laws. Some of the interesting case laws are actually about EMTALA with ambulances that are owned by hospitals, and some case law, meaning judgments in cases, have shown that a lot of the times they'll err that an ambulance is considered that hospital's property if it's owned by the hospital, and then EMTALA takes place at that point. And it's kind of an interesting thing when you read those lawsuits. Some things about EMTALA. EMTALA violations can cause fines to the hospital, the medical providers, the crews, the ambulances. They can cause you to pay fines. They can cause you to lose your job. They can cause you to lose stature with the Medicare and Medicaid people. EMTALA is not a substitute for malpractice. Emergency stabilization does not mean long-term treatment. It literally means emergency stabilization so that the patient can be transferred somewhere. And they can only, here's the part you're coming to, they can only be transferred if the risks are outweighed by the benefits. Some examples for that would be a mother getting, I had a good one from the other day. I didn't run it, but a provider did. A mother's getting ready to deliver twins at 25 weeks. Premature. You have one neonatal bed in your hospital, and twins are coming. Premature. So do the risk of transferring that patient outweigh the benefits of the patients being able to receive the care when they come out?
Well, they're premature. They're small. They'll fit in that bed.
I mean, they'll both fit, but they won't get the care they need. They won't have the amount of providers that they need. They won't have the resources that they need. So the risks are outweighed by those benefits. In that case, the parent wasn't in active labor. She was having contractions, but she wasn't about to deliver the babies. But you understand the point is that if the risks are outweighed by the benefits, the patient can be transferred, but the patient also has to be informed of the risk. They need to be informed of the benefits, and they need to sign and consent to this treatment.
So did they just give her medication to postpone labor, or?
In that instance, no. I want to say the contractions. This was told to me by another provider with
They
another
gave her down
company.
treatment.
With another company and hospital.
They gave her down treatment.
They hold the down between your legs now. They told her she wasn't having contractions to where she was in active labor. They were like once every 10 minutes. Her
Like 8 miles to RMH.
no, they took her to like UVA. Her water had broken, so she was on antibiotics, but she wasn't actively delivering the babies. She didn't deliver them until like the next day. So yeah. So they managed her. They provided emergency stabilization. They started her antibiotics. If she had been in active labor, they could have started a tocolytic, being the medication that can help slow labor, or they could have tried to give her a smooth muscle relaxant like mag sulfate to try to help with that. And they would have tried to stabilize her if she had been. In this case, though, the risk did outweigh the benefits of keeping her. They keep her, they don't have a bed for one of the babies, and the baby doesn't get the care it needs, it could die. The benefit, yes, you can go an hour, it was like an hour away from where they were, to UVA and get in the NICU bed, and you can get the treatment you want, but is it worth the risk of delivering on the road? Which is unlikely, but possible. And all of the risks include coma, death, and deterioration of condition. So, in order for EMTALA to be met, the patient must come into the emergency department. That was another thing that it brought up. Stabilization has to be within the facility's capabilities. An example for that would be we do the VA standbys here, where we go to the cath lab and do standbys there. For the patients are taken back to the cath lab and they've got the stents. They don't have the complete capability to do the stents and the stent placements. They go in and they do a lot of diagnostics there. But if they find a problem, they can't always necessarily fix it. The same is true up in Radford, depending on which doctor is on. Some of them aren't able to perform the intervention, so they'll stabilize within their capabilities, and then they'll transfer the patient somewhere that can manage them. They'll disable them to the best that their facility can do. They may not be able to do the long-term care there, but they can stabilize them enough to get them the 5 miles down the road somewhere they can.
Like the VA, an employee becomes injured while at the hospital, they take care of them and then transfer them out.
Okay. In order for it to occur, the patient must have an emergency condition. Having long-term arthritis does not qualify you under EMTALA. So if you walk in with arthritis pain, you're going to get treated, but it's not an emergency medical treatment that must be stabilized before you can be transferred. You don't actually have to go by ambulance. That was a fun thing I read in the standards. Transfer by ambulance is not actually required. This is actually going to be one of the case law scenarios we'll present, but for later, if y'all remember and are listening, it'll be the answer to a scenario. Radio medical control does not invoke EMTALA. Does not. Just because you call report to the emergency department, if they tell you to divert, you have not yet invoked EMTALA on that facility. So if you're 20 minutes away from Lewis Gale coming in with a pediatric patient that has a head injury, and you call them up and say, hey, I'm coming to you, I'll be there in a few minutes, and they say, no, divert. You have not stepped onto the emergency department, therefore EMTALA has not been invoked. Yes?
And a little quirk that we deal with on a regular basis on that note.
Yes.
If you go to the VVCC to pick up a patient going to the VA, you must call the ER before you leave the VVCC parking lot. Because the moment you turn left off the access road onto the access road to the VA, you are on VA property and EMTALA applies. And if you don't tell them that and they divert you, they have just committed an inadvertent EMTALA violation.
Very good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Because we've had that happen.
Yes. So,
Once you get on their property, so if you pull in the ER drive and you're on the line with MedCom, you're going to RMH.
I've had this happen to me as well with a pediatric patient going to Lewis Gale from Catawba, where there is no cell signal. You get cell signal finally with your crappy service, and you're turning on Brayburn and saying, I'm almost there. Once you turn on the hospital property, they cannot divert you because that patient is now on their property, and they get very upset, but they must provide stabilization care. That's another story for another day. Another point, active labor requires treatment. It's on the critical care practice exams. It's listed multiple times. Active labor requires treatment. You cannot send a person out. You cannot put them on the stretcher when their baby is crowning. It does not work like that. You must stabilize the patient, even if it includes delivering that baby. So, if in that scenario that we had discussed, if the babies were coming right then, they would have had to deliver the babies. There would have been no option but to deliver the babies and transfer after. Would the risk would have been high? Yeah, but the risk of delivering twins and then carrying them for 50, 45 minutes down the road is a lot more than the risk for stabilizing as best you can in a hospital. And the final point to bring up with EMTALA is the MD has an obligation to certify transport and state that he's evaluated the patient's safe for transfer, and he signs off on it as well. And that's all we have on EMTALA. Patients have rights. Just saying. They do have rights. They have 6 essential rights on
Patent?
every single call. Patient. Did it spell wrong?
Yeah.
No, it's not. P-A-I. Yeah, it's in my. I did this at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Patent net.
Hating it, right?
Patent net rights.
Patients have rights. The first right they have is to establish a DNR or an advanced directive and to have it honored. It must be valid, but they have the right to establish one. My biggest thing is when I see a DNR, if the patient is incapable of signing it, yet at the bottom their name is written under some scribble, that's not a valid DNR. If the patient is capable of making their medical decision and someone else signs it, that's not a valid DNR. You have to make sure that the thing is valid. If they're capable, they need to sign it. If they're incapable, someone with the ability to, their doctor, their power of attorney, their next of kin, they need to have signed it. They have the right to self-determination, meaning they have the right to refuse treatment at any time, for any reason, without any explanation. When that happens, you need to explain the benefits, the risk, the treatments, and the condition. But a patient can refuse care at any time, during, before, or even after transport when you drop them off. They have the right to refuse and say, I'm not doing it. Even if it is against medical advice, which in some cases and a lot it is, they have the right to say, no, I ain't doing it. They have the right to consent. We'll get into some different types of consent on the next slide. But there's informed, implied, and then some things about emancipation. Emancipation occurs, by the way, when a minor, someone under the age of 18, is emancipated by court. Each state has its own set of laws which are really confusing about minors' emancipation, because minors in some states are considered emancipated if they become pregnant or parents, or if they become married. And also it says enlisting in the armed forces, but to enlist you have to be 18, so don't know where they got that, unless they did that CCPT registered thing. Either way, those are, in some states, those are some grounds for immediate emancipation. So the parent, and a 16-year-old child has the right to make medical decisions for their baby in some states. In some states they don't. And that's an ethical issue that can be discussed and debated. Number 4, they have the right to receive care without interruption or without abandonment. If you leave a patient at any time, it is abandonment. If you turn a patient over to someone who is not able to manage their condition, example, under triaging and giving an ALS patient to a BLS provider, if you fail to relinquish care at the transfer facility, you fail to respond or complete a call, or you fail to report your inability to complete the call due to your health, illness, a mechanical problem, those are all considered abandonment or causes for neglect. They have the right to appropriate care without neglect, and they have the right to privacy and HIPPA. HIPPA being enforced. HIPPA being the Health Information Patient Portability
Privacy
Act.
and Portability.
Privacy and Portability Act. There's so many acronyms. I'm trying to remember all these too. Negligence is a failure to get the patient appropriate care and to meet the standard of care. It's up to the plaintiff to have the burden of proof. They have to prove all 4 of the following: that they must have had a duty to act, a breach of duty to act, damage, and direct cause. This has situations also where you don't have a legal duty to act, but you have an ethical duty, like you see in MVC, or you come up on an MVC and you're the first one there. If you're off duty, you may not have a legal duty to act, but ethically, you should probably stop and make sure people are okay, in most people's opinion. It is up to the plaintiff, meaning the person that felt that they were neglected, to prove these things. Is everybody kind of clear on what it means to have a duty to act and a breach of duty to act? Everybody's kind of clear on that? Okay. Next is consent. In addition to emancipation, there's two types of consent: expressed and implied. Expressed meaning you must be of legal age and informed, where you know the procedure, the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, the outcomes. You know everything that's about to be done to you, and you're okay with it. And implied is someone who is unable to state consent, but they would probably want life-saving treatment. So if you come up on a little kid who's hurt in the park, who's got an open leg fracture, or something is wrong with that child, they're having an acute medical problem, they're having an asthma or a seizure, and you can't find mom or dad, you would assume that mom or dad would want you to perform life-saving actions on that child until proven otherwise. If the patient's unresponsive, you'd assume that unless they have a DNR taped to their chest, they would probably want some life-saving interventions. They probably want you to open their airway, suction them out, bag them, start CPR. Those are people that would give implied consent. Mentally ill or disabled people are unable to give informed consent because they don't have the medical or the mental capacity to understand and to give informed consent. With them, it would be implied as well. And also a patient that is altered, even if it is acutely, is unable to give consent because they're unable to understand the risk, the benefits, the alternatives, and they're unable to understand what's going on with their condition. So it's something to keep in mind. All right, last one, guys, and then we get to talk some. HIPAA. The goal is to create a consistent standard of patient care and privacy, and it's also to allow patients to have easy access and to correct errors in their health records. It covers protective health information, which is information that if you posted on social media that you left on a table that could identify a patient. Name, birthday, in some cases diagnosis, the room number you left them, address, phone number, insurance, anything that if somebody found they could trace back to the patient is considered a protective health information. It's only disclosed for billing, treatment, or payment, and otherwise you need written consent or a court order. Some variations of the release are different based on each state laws, which is true for most of everything. The state laws are kind of varying on some of these issues. But basically that's it for HIPAA. That's all we're going to really go over. It's a really big thing. I've listed some sources in the PowerPoint so that you can read on your own some things about it.
It's also allowed to exchange the information for operations, and under operations that includes performance improvement, quality management.
Yes.
It is not a HIPAA violation to share patient information for the purposes of identifiers that could trace back to the patient for the purposes of education or for quality assurance, quality management. Correct.
And they are listed in the guideline as well. It was just a lot to try to type at Portland. So that concludes the lecture portion. Does anybody have any questions on this part? Then we have a class discussion. Yay! I kind of summed this up for you guys so that way we don't have to read the entire article, but it's in here if you want to read it. It's kind of this cool discussion point. I looked up in the news about some recent EMS legal things. This one's from, I think, 2014. It's a little bit older, but here's the gist of it. And we can kind of discuss the points that we just went over. So this is in LA. The case was versus the County of Los Angeles and their paramedics, individually stated. County of Los Angeles Fire Department / paramedics. So you're called to respond at 11 o'clock at night for a patient who's outside with her friends with a severe headache, projectile vomiting, and dizziness. Friends say they were inside with the beer. She was singing, having a good time, or in the bar. She had one beer, singing, having a good time, and all of a sudden she has a sudden onset earache with dizziness and she can't stand. She goes outside to get some air, projectile vomiting. She comes back inside, tells her friends she needs help. They kind of carry her outside where they wait for you. And she kind of gets out of it. The paramedics there concluded she had anxiety and ETOH on board, despite what her friends told her that she only drank 1 to 2 beers. They transported her, and in their report, that's specifically what they put, anxiety and alcohol intoxication. 3 hours later, because the report was given, she's just drunk. They took their time getting to her. 3 hours later, it's found out she had an intracranial bleed and suffered brain damage. If you're familiar with head bleeds, some of these things kind of send up a red flag. Projectile vomiting, sudden onset of the severe headache. The fact that she was kind of getting lethargic and out of it, and she's only had 1 to 2 beers. If they'd have tested her blood alcohol sooner, they'd have seen she wasn't actually intoxicated. And they'd have seen that there could have been another cause for this. And then another fun fact is, after the fact, for an unknown reason, the medics that responded went in and changed their documentation after they found out what had happened. And they tried to address this as more of they added things to make it look like it was more of an intoxication event. They added things that weren't actually on the call to try to make their case stronger. And it kind of burned them, because it's timestamped, guys. So, after reading this and hearing the presentation, let's go around and kind of point out some things about this where we can let's start with proving negligence. Well, did they have a duty to act to this patient?
Yeah.
Dale, did they have a breach of duty? Did they breach the standard patient care for this patient?
Yeah.
Chad, did they cause the harm to this patient?
Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Sarah?
I'm not saying.
I'm sorry, Vanessa. Was there damage to this patient?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, because with the intracranial bleed, had they not just brushed it off, she probably wouldn't have the extensive brain damage that she has now. She could have been treated a lot quicker.
Yeah. When you read this, I'll put the link and everything, and this will be available. You can read all the details. This is just a brief summary. There were a lot of red flags on this call that said, hey, something's up, we need to check her. Some things like, well, did we do a 12 lead? Did we check her vital signs? They completed this call in like under 10 minutes. They claimed they got an informed consent refusal. They claimed that they checked 2 sets of vital signs, and there was a list of things that kind of sent up red flags of like, hey.
They didn't transport her?
No. Oh wait, yes. Yes, they did transport her to the ED.
Oh.
I'm sorry, they didn't get an informed refusal. They got her to sign the informed consent form. Thank you for correcting that.
Oh.
No, they did transport, thank you. They took her to the ED, and that's where they gave the report of just ETOH. But they had her sign her consent form being dizzy, lethargic, and kind of out of it with thinking that she was intoxicated. So they didn't necessarily have consent as well. Unless you could argue they had implied consent.
Yeah, up until you said the earache, the first thought that popped in my head was somebody roofied her.
Even if that
Yeah,
had been
I
the
mean,
case,
but
I mean,
You should
would you have
still...
just said, hey, she's drunk and thrown her on the stretcher?
No.
What are some other things that kind of flow with red flag? We've talked about negligence. What's another thing in here? Thank you. It's a huge issue. They changed their report after the fact to support their case, and it's time stamped. And this lady won this lawsuit, obviously. Her and her family won.
I would hope so. She's
Well,
going to
yeah.
have a long-term care after.
Yeah.
It's not like they added an addendum to, oh, I forgot this. It's
They changed it.
they changed it to conceal and hide.
Yeah. Do we see anything else in here that kind of throws up a red flag with the medical, legal, ethical issues? Were they ethically correct to go back and change her chart?
No.
Did they treat her ethically? I mean, if you rolled up on a patient at 11 o'clock at night that appeared drunk, I mean, is this what you would do? Or
How
would you
did
do
they-
differently?
I mean, you would
How
assume
do they
it. You would put
conclude
it
that
in
it
the
was
paper.
ETOH on board?
Well, I mean, she stated she drank 1 to 2 beers. So you know it's on board, but it's not intoxication.
Why is it not diabetes?
I was gonna say with that, like they didn't do any differentials like with sugar.
I'm just
Rule out.
arguing for the point of arguing at this point. So I'm just saying, like,
You good at
I-
arguing.
no, I agree with you guys. I'm just trying to get y'all to think, like, was it ethical what they did? If you roll up at 11 o'clock at night on a patient, you think they're
11
drunk.
o'clock, no. 4 in the morning, probably, because I'm still a little mad that I woke up.
So it's something to keep in mind. I mean,
I'm kidding. By
would
the
you
way,
have done
it's
something different if you'd have rolled up on this lady?
Yeah, I would have probably hooked her up to a monitor and started checking everything normally. And maybe if there was an ALS, like they were paramedics. There's so many more things that they can do that's out of the scope of my practice as a BLS provider. But yet, even as a BLS provider, I could be like, hey, this was sudden. She had the earache. This is earache with lethargy and dizziness equals possible head issue.
For the sake of arguing, she could have ruptured an eardrum and she's drunk. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to think about, like, all the different angles of it as well. And I completely agree that, yes, they should have done more. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it's something to think about the next time you take care of a patient where you're like, is there a question about what's going on with this patient? Should I err on the side of caution and treat it? I don't think she fell in the scenario. I think it said that she had some kind of like medical condition that went undiagnosed.
Okay, well, she's done thinned her blood out with alcohol and
Well,
Yeah.
the other bad part about this is this is a symptom of the system. You've got so many people now that are using the ER as a primary care,
or ambulances. to
and
go up
ambulances
down
as
the
a
border.
taxi cab. And it's 11 o'clock at night in LA, and their shift probably started at 7, and this is probably their 8th run of the night already. Somebody drank too much, and now they don't feel good. Oh, boo-hoo. She wants to go to the hospital. All right, get in the truck, let's go.
Does everybody agree with this point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have y'all seen these calls?
I've done it.
I've seen it. Where you're like, God, not another drunk. Or God, not another rehab patient. Nope.
But even with that though, if in their
It's-
gut they thought this is just a drunk chick,
Yes.
they would still, I think, have to do some like pertinent negatives just to cover their butt.
You would think. I don't think there were, and I think that's kind of some of the things they went back and added in. When you, if you want to read this, the actual legal thing, because I picked this up off of a court website of cases in the past. You can go through and read all the details on it. It's like 9 pages long, so I tried to summarize it as brief as I could.
And then you drop your chest pains patient in the triage area.
They sit there all day.
And they sit there for 10
6
hours after you've done give them 2 nitros,
Which
aspirin,
may have happened today.
started a line.
BJ had a friend that they did that to and ended up dying.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, yeah, they acted wrong, but it's also
telemetry
a symptom of the system.
The hall beds.
No.
They've had it, they just don't use it.
Alright, guys. Now that we're all warmed up and talking, let's have some scenarios.
No,
On the screen.
These are not that bad.
no.
There's no more colored pencils
Paul,
under
I-
this one.
Break down our truck real quick.
That is a sorry excuse.
Oh yeah.
You said an hour.
I said an hour. It's been 50
An hour.
minutes. Alright, last part. Scenario time. Alright, who wants number 1? ALS provider, please. Because this is a medication one.
Andy said he'd do it.
Alright, Andy, Art, you're both on our truck. Because this is, actually no, Andy, you can do this one by yourself. Art,
I'm on truck with Art.
Alright, Andy, Aaron, you're on a truck. Andy, patient's having nausea, vomiting, just straight up feeling nasty. You want to give him some Zofran, so you reach in the box on that top middle shelf, you grab a vial, you draw it up, and you push it.
That is,
After the call, and you transfer the patient to the ED, you're filling out the drug box report, and they say, you gave Zofran? Because it's right here. And you've got an empty vial of mag sulfate. What's the first thing you need to do?
Finish my application to AMR.
no, finish your letter of resignation so they can't fire you.
Ah,
Alright,
okay.
so seriously, what's the first thing you
Multitask,
need to
believe it or
do?
not.
You made a medication error with a patient you just found out. What do you need to do?
Tell the doctor or nurse that's taking care of the patient right now?
So we report the incident.
Sure.
Yeah. We want to tell somebody, let them know, like, hey, this is what's up.
Oh,
Yeah, it's recorded. It's okay.
I messed up.
That's okay. Yeah, you want to report the incident because not only
Charlie Kilo, he said.
not only does it come back as you made a mistake, but it's also you gave this patient a medication in error. What if you had given them morphine, the whole vial of that, instead of the Zofran? You need to manage this
Depends
patient.
on how big the vial
What
is.
if they're allergic? What if you give them something they're allergic to? They need to manage the patient. They need to have
My
an
name's
incident
Arthur
reported.
Watkins.
My next question. What type of behavior is this? Is this an at-risk behavior, a reckless behavior, or a human error?
Is it?
It's a reckless human error.
Depends. Is this the first time it's happened? Has it?
Let's say for argument's sake, yeah. It's the first time
Okay,
this happened.
then-
Andy's been here a while. He's kind of tired. It's his last call of the shift.
Wait.
First call of the shift. We're talking about last call of the shift.
Last call of the shift, whatever.
Last call.
Well, this is Andy, so.
It's
I'm gonna go reckless.
I would think
I'm
it's
gonna
reckless.
say human error.
Well, okay. Did they check? Did they look at the vial before they popped the top and
They
drew
did
it up? So then it's reckless.
They just grabbed a vial that looked like
It's
Zofran
reckless.
and popped it.
They actually called it at-risk behavior because there was a risk for giving the wrong medication, and they didn't recognize it. Reckless would be knowing that it was an error and giving it anyways. That's the only defining. So I would say, yeah, I could see where you'd say reckless, but for reckless, they require you to know that this was bad and I did it anyways.
Yes.
So
It is bad to reach and pick up something and not identify it and give it.
it is very bad, yes.
So therefore, it is
So they're defining this one as
reckless.
at-risk-
See, you
at-risk.
agree.
I wouldn't say I disagree with you. I would say it is somewhat reckless, yes, but they consider this an at-risk event because they didn't do a read back of the medication. They didn't confirm it was the medication. They didn't make sure it was the appropriate dose. So they're considering this an at-risk behavior. Reckless would have been they knew it was mag sulfate and they grabbed it.
Yeah.
But you know what? I already grabbed the vial, so I'm gonna push it anyways.
The difference between at-risk and reckless is the knowledge that you're doing wrong, and you do it anyways.
Okay, you got the 5 hours of medication administration. So you pick up a
So
med.
they obviously didn't follow their training, but they didn't look at it and say, this is mag sulfate, I want to give Zofran, I'm going to give the mag sulfate anyways.
There's education and a policy in place on medication administration. So how?
So this would be considered that's the next question. What would be done for this? This would be considered a coachable event where you look at this person and say, look, next time you need to go over your 5 rights. Next time you need to make sure that you look at the medication. Next time you need to make sure that when you draw it up that everything's correct and you don't just grab a vial and all of those things. So it would be a coachable behavior. It's something you could fix because the provider didn't knowingly try to cause harm. You get what I'm saying?
No.
They didn't
Okay.
mean
Agree.
you're
disagree.
overthinking it.
It is
To
something where
put it into
it's up to
BLS
you.
terms, patient's got a broken leg. Okay? You put the traction splint on and you put it on the right leg, but you didn't tighten the strap to pull traction.
Well, that defeats the whole purpose of the traction splint.
Right. But you didn't intend to do it wrong. You just forgot to tighten the strap. It's the same difference.
Well, then I'm a fucking idiot.
Well, that very well may be. And this is the same example. You may not have done. You should have known, and you
I have
have been
faith in
trained.
you,
Should have
Andy.
been trained to.
I said I have faith in you.
But that's where
Okay.
instead of just
Oh,
trying to
don't.
blame the person, you did the wrong thing.
But I guess I think
I'm going to
the-
smack you over the head.
Even the and I'm not saying smack over the head. I'm just saying I guess I see it as a reckless and not go through punitive measures. Still coach it, but it
But it wouldn't
even
be.
through the small handful
if-
of BLS medications.
Okay, an example of a reckless behavior. You're driving an emergency. There's a stop sign in front of you. And you see the stop sign, you say there's a stop sign there, and instead of slowing down, you speed up. Knowing that
I gotta beat that train.
knowing that you've got a stop sign and the other lanes of traffic do not. That's reckless. Because you know that there's consequences and you choose to do what you know you shouldn't do.
All right, we're going to move on to the next one because these are all the same kind of principles. I'm so hungry. Example 2. Paul and Art, you're on a truck. You're both ALS. Yeah, no. These came from an EMS discussion board of things that have actually happened. Yeah.
No, I think that just happened like the next county south of us.
All right. A head injury patient was giving a paralytic without sedation. You're about to RSI a patient. Paul, you're brand new, so you prepare your sucks and accommodate. Art's been at this a while, and he tells you you don't really need the sucks. She's pretty much out of it anyway. She's not responding. She's good. You're leery, but you're new, so you're like, all right, Art knows his stuff. I'm gonna roll with this. While en route, you kind of notice that the heart rate's going up, the BP's going up, and you document it as, okay, maybe he's in pain or something. Yeah.
That's all.
Hit him with some
Or
more
something.
pain meds.
And at arrival, you're transferring the patient into bed. Everything else went fine. The nurse is getting a report, and she looks down, and the patient's looking around. She runs out of the room. What is the first thing you do? Paul, this was your call. What is the first thing
I do?
Yeah,
Drop a load in your britches.
not quite.
Get
Find
my
where I
card,
put the rest of
get
my
my card out and take a picture of it so I know what it used to look like.
Can I have
I
the
found
last
where
two
I-
slices?
Well, the first thing you need to do is obviously, you're going to have to admit you made a mistake, because the moment you start going from, and that's what happened to those guys in LA. The moment you go
Trying
from
to conceal it, you
the
end up
moment you go
worse.
from making a mistake, a legitimate mistake, either through misguidance or lack of knowledge, to trying to hide that mistake, you go from being an at-risk behavior to being reckless behavior. You're purposely trying to conceal what you did wrong.
Right. So
So-
you admit to the mistake. The staff there or yourself can have sedation administered to this patient because it's pretty cruel to keep them there awake, not able to breathe.
You already
and
drew it up,
experience
so you got it somewhere.
I mean, it's somewhere. Unless
Probably
you
tossed
just,
in the sheets.
it's somewhere.
Yeah.
So you admit to the mistake, you report it, and you allow this patient to be treated.
Apologize.
Who's responsible for this?
Everybody involved.
Well, if you're the provider that didn't give the etomidate, and you knew you should have given etomidate,
This would be recklessness, because you knew better. He said,
but
you still did it anyways.
you're at fault because you knew what the procedure was and you should have followed the procedure. The person that gave you the bad advice is at fault because he used his experience and influence to unduly influence your decision and push you, because it's more complex. Yes, I, as the new guy, I'm wrong for not doing it the way I knew I should have done it. But I've got a seasoned provider who's got 10 years of experience on me telling me this is the way to do it. It's much easier. I'm thinking, okay, he's been there, done that. I haven't. I'm going to do what my superior or my mentor tells me to do because he's done this 10 times and I've never done it.
All right, Aaron.
Yes.
Which type of behavior is this? At risk, human error, or reckless?
Well, since he knew that he was supposed to give it and he didn't, I would say reckless.
For Art, maybe. What about Paul? He didn't know him better. He was going by Art who
It
said,
said that he
Art
But
just
he-
sits here.
But he still knows that he's supposed to
He
give.
said he knew better, but
the-
he was reliant on the, well, it's
I
the
w-
other one.
I want to say at risk
Cameron.
because it seems
Yeah.
like it should be an at risk, but by the definition, it also seems like it should be reckless.
Well, the question comes down to, did Paul know he was doing bad and did he mean to cause harm to this patient?
It's at risk for reckless behavior.
He did not mean to cause harm to the patient, and he thought that he was doing the right thing, so it would be at risk.
Courtney, was this negligence by Paul? Did he have a duty to act? To take care of this patient? Did he operate within his scope? Did he give all the medicines he was supposed to? Did he treat him like he was supposed to? No.
That's why we have the problem.
All right. Did he cause damage to this patient? I mean, did he cause them to be awake for this? The sedative would be the medication that knocks him out. Did he cause that? Did he cause it by not giving it to him?
Yeah.
Okay. Was he the cause of this? Was he the cause of him not getting the sedation? I feel like I'm yelling.
You are.
You are.
No, you're speaking loud enough to be heard. You're
Okay.
What?
So,
You're projecting.
did he cause? Was he the direct cause of why this patient didn't get the sedation?
Yeah, because you
Yes.
could have
So
given it to him.
we have negligence. You are liable, Paul.
Now,
We'll write to you.
to throw a twist on this, you go to RSI your patient, you go to get the drugs out, and the vial of etomidate is out of date.
Yeah.
Do you give it anyway?
Do you have any supplemental regular?
Your only vial of etomidate is out of date.
So you're negligent in checking your truck off.
Well, but if it's a sealed
a
sealed
sealed
thing,
box.
and I mean, how many times does the pharmacy fuck up and leave empty morphine?
Right.
This is interesting because I read a case when I was in school that a double ALS crew was found negligent and they had to pay damages because they failed to check off their cardiac monitor that morning
And the batteries were
and
dead.
the batteries were dead.
Yep.
All right.
They've had that happen several times.
We'll go to the next one because we're about to lose recording, and I still have a couple scenarios. Then we can always continue the discussion. All right, we're going with Scott and Chad.
No,
Yeah.
no,
All right,
What, does
Chad.
anyone want to work with me?
no.
Chad, you're going to a residence for an OD. All right, you treat the patient, you take her to the hospital that her husband wants. Everything went great. No problem with patient care. At the end of the call, you look at the name again, and you're like, you know what? Will told me about this lady. He knows her and he's close friends with her. I should call him to come down here because he can help her. And I believe that it's going to be better for her to get Will down here because I know this lady.
Mm-hmm. I'll end up
Alright.
in jail.
What's stand out about this?
Breaking HIPPA.
Why is
Yeah.
her husband choosing which hospital she's going?
Because
Because
she's
she's
unconscious.
Because she's OD. She's out.
I mean, wouldn't you just go to the closest one?
I
Not
mean,
necessarily.
I think
No.
in this scenario, I think it was the
You're-
closest one. This is a
you're
legitimate case law.
You're at Raleigh Court, which is closer.
Wherever Ricky takes us.
Univista!
This is an actual case of Hauschwitz versus Ledoux, and I cited it. So this EMS provider had to pay over $34,000 in damages and attorney fees because she violated HIPAA. Will wasn't really that close of a friend. He didn't need to know, and she had the right to privacy, and by calling him, you violated her rights. All right, next.
Okay,
Who wants up next? 911 status epilepticus. Epilepticus. Who wants it? Art, you want to talk on this one?
My
I thought
roommate's
I
up
thought I'd done been grilled.
No, you just been everyone's partner. You
You've
got
been
him
everyone's
screwed by
partner and you've been to
association.
jail a couple times, but you're gone now. You're back. All right, Art, you're going to pick up a ped with seizures. You'll get there in 5 minutes, a reasonable time.
I'll drive you.
You arrive on scene for a 3-year-old male in status epilepticus. You begin patient care by clearing the area, suctioning out his secretions, opening his mouth. You're having a wicked awesome
With
day.
your
and You get an IO.
If you had, I can't
Sorry.
see the rest of it.
It's on that screen.
You're having a really great day, and you get an IO, Art. So you give him some Valium, Versed, whatever's in the box, it's fine, as the recommended dose on the Broslow. The patient stops seizing, and you manage them and bag them with supportive care to the ER. The patient, however, does suffer an anoxic brain injury and dies. The family comes after you, Art, for negligence and for the emergency department. They're claiming that there was a delay in transport because you stopped to treat them on scene. There was a different treatment plan that the ER could have used, and you could have done something different. There was a long response delay, and the crew did not act within their scope of practice. Art, do they have a case against you?
I don't think so.
No.
Why?
Because I did everything that I could possibly do.
I mean, unless there's extra scope that I don't know about that you're not giving us the information on.
There's not.
That's standard care for a seizure patient.
It is. And that's the point. They don't have a case. There's no negligence here.
They're just
You-
upset because their kid
They're
died.
grieving because
They
they
are.
lost their child.
But the point of this one is to show you that you arrived on time. You did everything you could. You operated within your scope of practice. You had a duty to act. You acted. You were not the cause of the damage the seizure was, and you treated it appropriately. So they don't have a case for negligence. It's really sad, It's tragic. Send them flowers, but it's not Art's fault. Art.
No, they just tried to sue me. They're gonna give flowers.
Send them.
They might seize when you get flowers.
Poison ivy.
But you get the point. They don't have a case. Art's safe. In order for that plaintiff to have gotten negligence, even if Art had caused damage and taken too long, all 4 of those must be met. All 4, not just one. Art would have had to cause the damage, he would have had to have a breach of duty, failure of duty to act, and he would have had to be the direct cause that caused the damage. So, he does not meet the criteria.
There's been a lot of cases I know in DC where people are trying to sue because it took so long for the ambulance to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so far they haven't had nobody's won because they're doing all they can do.
Yep.
Oh.
I mean, alone response time is considered negligent if it's not warranted. If we're coming from the office to the rehab building and it takes us 20 minutes, that would be a negligent response time. However, if we get there in 5 minutes, which is a reasonable response time, it's not considered a failure to respond to that call.
Of course, they could be negligent because our badges, they won't let our badges work, so
Yeah.
we're standing outside while...
Yeah, and with that, kick the bottom right side of the door and it opens.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
On a recorded line, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Hey,
All of the sides secure once you get in. It's just gets you through the door. And then there's usually the rent-a-cot downstairs.
This is the last one I want to do, that I really want to get on the recording. The other one, I don't really like it. I kind of want to go over it, but it's sketchy and I don't know. I got it off the EMS website. This one's a good one though. So, it's your second call of the shift. It's 7:30. You're en route to a station. You're eating McDonald's. The manager comes up and tells you that there's a customer in the back that's vomiting and he wants you to come out. You end up going to him, and he's a 66-year-old male with vomit all over him. He's diaphoretic, ashen, shortness of breath. He looks pretty uppity. He's got a nice suit. He's got a pretty wife. Tells you, hey, everything's okay. Wife says, no, he's not doing so great. He won't go.
Is it for your daughter?
Probably. So you're trying to convince him. He says, all right, I'll let you do an assessment. You can touch me. You can look at some stuff. I'll let you put the stickers on my chest. I'll let you listen. 12 lead shows he's having a STEMI. To show you guys the BLS provider, he's having a heart attack. No, this is a different one.
Yeah, it was like, what?
I'm sorry. I switched them. Where did my other one go?
So he's having a heart attack.
He's having a heart attack. I'm sorry for the wrong side being up.
Oh no, you're fine.
He's having a heart attack. So here's the scenario now. He's alert and oriented. He answers all of your questions appropriately. He says, I will not go.